Welcome to episode 28. On the show today, I'm joined by Dr. Edward Ziff, OBE DL, Chairman and Chief Executive of Town Centre Securities. Following a very happy childhood mixed with boarding school, Edward opens up on his journey into owning a company with £325 million worth of assets, becoming a Deputy Lieutenant for the County of West Yorkshire, and why he became Chairman of Leeds Cares following the diagnosis of his son with leukemia. We discuss his OBE, meeting Princess Anne, spending the night with Prince Charles in Dumfries House, and having the pleasure of meeting the Queen. Edward has far too many successes to discuss them all in this podcast, but you can't help but be inspired by his generosity, openness, and eye for a good deal. Enjoy. Welcome to the Johnny Ross Audio Experience. I'm Johnny Ross, founder and digital marketing strategist of Fleet Marketing. Each podcast I'll be bringing you an expert to inspire you, to give you some great business growth takeaways, and to get you thinking about marketing and the bigger picture of how businesses can improve, adapt and grow. I look forward to sharing this with you on each podcast, so here we go. Hello, and thanks for joining us. We are live on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. Today I have Edward Ziff with me, Chairman and Chief Executive of Town Centre Securities. How are you, Edward?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you here. Just to remind you,
shouldn't you say that at the end?
Well, say it at the end and the beginning. Just to remind everyone, as I was saying, we are live on LinkedIn. If you've got any questions for Edward, feel free to pop them in the comments and I'll try and introduce them. And if you're listening on the podcast, thanks for being here and listening. It's great to have you here. So, Edward, tell you were born in Leeds. Tell me just sort of, the story. Give me a bit of a quick story on how you got to where you are and where you started. You went to Leeds Uni as well. Is that right?
I did.
Yeah. And you went to what college? Did I see on your CV you went to Bristol?
Yeah, I went away to boarding school. Something I never forgave my parents for. Tom Brown school days and all that. It was a rude awakening. My wife tells me, thank God I did go there, because she said I would have been the most spoiled, horrible person had I not had some sort of disadvantage in my life. Listen, I make no bones about it. I have had a very privileged life. My parents were successful, reasonably affluent, and both came from high-achieving families. And I had a very wonderful start in life. I came from a very loving home. The only thing I could find to pick fault at my parents' parenting was the fact that they sentenced me to 5 years away at boarding school. But apart from that, what I remember of my childhood was all very happy and you look back in sepia and there's nothing that stands out as being particularly unpleasant. I'll put it like that. So
was it an all boys boarding school?
It was. It
was
an all boys boarding school. I found it a pretty brutal existence. A lot at the time. So Clifton College was a traditional English boarding school. It had one house was for Jewish pupils. So I attended that house. There were quite a few kids in the house who came from broken homes, and I have to say I have a few memories of thinking, I wonder what was going on at home, but there was nothing like that going on. And my parents were a very together couple from right from when I started, and my early memories all the way through to when my dad passed away, and my mum thankfully is still with us today. But I have only happy memories of my childhood. And that's, something that I've tried to replicate with my own children, if I'm being honest.
So you went to Leeds Uni and you studied well, you came out with a Doctor of Business
No,
Administration.
I didn't. No, I didn't. I came out
Tell
of
me
Leeds
more.
University.
Tell me
Came
more.
out of Leeds University with nothing. After a year, I thought I was wasting my time. I think the examiners probably thought I was wasting my time as well. I was studying economics and politics, and the best thing that happened to me during my year at Leeds University was I think I got my golf handicap down from 24 to 8. I was reacquainting myself with Leeds actually because I'd been away at boarding school, and I was just desperate to come home, and made a lot of friends quite quickly. Some are still friends to this day, I didn't last the course. My qualifications I have are not really for me to use, to be honest. It was an honorary doctorate I was given at Leeds Beckett University. A doctorate of business administration, and I do put it out there, but I probably shouldn't. So particularly when I compare myself with my son, who is a proper doctor, a medical doctor, and what he had to do to get his doctorate was a lot more intricate and involved than mine. So,
have you managed to improve the golf score this year with a bit more free time on your hands?
I haven't had free time on my hands.
Have you not?
I have found since March, since lockdown, I've found it incredibly demanding. You have Zoom calls from morning till night. What I have done since lockdown, I thought it was quite funny. I turned 60 in April, and I thought it was quite a funny thing to say that if I was going to catch COVID, I needed to catch it before the 7th of April, because after the 9th of April, my prognosis was not going to be so good. And I thought that was very funny until about the 10th of April, when I thought, this isn't very funny anymore. So I decided to exercise properly and vigorously every day. And so I do 5 miles of something every day, either on the treadmill or go out for a walk. And I've lost weight. I feel loads better. And it was just determination to ensure that if, God forbid, you catch this horrible virus, I think if you're a fitter person, you've got a better chance of succeeding with it. So that takes up the first couple of hours of my morning. I say my morning prayers every morning. I do my exercise, and my day gets started at about 10 o'clock. And there are many days when you don't even have time for lunch, and you've got Zoom call after Zoom call, and you look at the clock and it's 6 o'clock at night, and you think, where's that gone? And then you finish the evening and you've still got 150 emails to reply to. And I found it incredibly busy, actually. So much so that when it was warmer weather, I do try and get a game of golf on a Friday afternoon. I try and play on a Sunday morning if I can. And it didn't quite happen like that. I do ensure that when I switch my computer off on a Friday evening, I don't switch it on again until the earliest on Sunday morning, because I think it's a good thing to have a day away from it. And that's not a religious observance thing. I think it's just good sense to not be doing the same thing every day, because, you need to have variety. So I haven't played as much golf as I'd liked, and now it's wet and miserable. That's the last thing I want to do, is to play golf and paddle around in the mud. So.
Well, I wanted to just tap into something you mentioned then around the coming back to your desk and having 150 emails. Well, how do you deal with email? I mean, we are inundated with emails. Do you find that you have to sort of go back to them, or once you've opened it, you just delete it? What's your way of tackling the inbox?
There are people who are, I was just looking, there are people who are far better at it than me. I like to finish the day with less than 50 emails in my inbox every day. And those are either reminders or whatever. And if people are waiting for answers, they're waiting for answers, and they need you to answer them. Some of it's rubbish, some of it's just circular stuff. But I do get quite obsessed about it.
Yeah, I think I do as well.
And it's silly because some of it is rubbish, but some of it's an important way to communicate. So.
We've got someone on Facebook saying you've clearly had many successful achievements to be proud of, and I will be going into a lot of them today. But he's put, or he or she, because I can't see who it is, but surely top of the list has to be addressing the community from the hallowed turf at Ellen Road last week. Yeah,
amazing. Well, it was just amazing to be at Ellen Road for the first time. I think the last time I went was when we beat Huddersfield in March. For the home game the week before, or 10 days before we went into lockdown. so I'm very close to Hasan Al-Bichait at the UHC synagogue in Leeds, and he rang me about 6 weeks ago, and he said he's thinking about doing this project, lighting up Leeds. What did I think? So I said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Anything, we're all looking for things to do, watching television night after night and wasting our time. Anything different is a nice thing to do. And he said, so have you got any good ideas where to go? So I said, yeah, I've got some ideas. I don't know whether you think that they're good. I said, the obvious places are, the front steps of Harewood House. My office here in Leeds looks out across at the LGI. And I said, if I could get you on the roof on the helicopter pad at LGI, how about that? I said, the Grand Theatre is amazing. I said, how about being on the pitch at Ellen Road? He said, what, for a game? I said, well, I don't know whether you'll get selected. But, and it went from there. And Albie's got fantastic drive and determination. And I got him into some of those places, and I think it was very well received. And being on the pitch at Ellen Road was a thrill, I got a message from I don't know, Lucy Manning, who works for BBC News, and she sent me a message whilst I was there, the lengths you'll get to go on the pitch at Ellen Road sort of thing. But it was amazing to be there. They have those sort of rigs that they have, which is a bit like a big solarium where they grow the pitch at night, with the lights. And I just wondered if I sort of stripped off and put some sun cream on, whether I might come out with a tan. But yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. Leeds United were incredibly generous in letting us in. We reckoned it was the first time that Hanukkah candles have ever been lit on the pitch of a football pitch in the Premier League. So.
I think it was great. I followed it every evening, and the places. I mean, on the stage at the Grand, as you say, and he was in the iconic Merion Centre as well.
Sure.
Some great places. Really, really clever idea,
and fantastically well followed. I mean, by the end of the week, I think he had the thick end of 20,000 observers on Facebook.
Wow,
amazing.
Wow. So you did the business administration. You then tell me, you're from a family of retailers. You're from a family of entrepreneurs, and the likes of Pennywise, the likes of Stylo. Just tell me how you some of the businesses that you worked for before you.
I left university early. I got a job working, doing a part-time degree, a day a week, in land economy and surveying, and got a job with a firm of estate agents in Leeds, who in those days were well known, a company called Hepper Watson. And I was paid the princely sum of 10 quid a week. And I remember going to see John Hepper after the first month, when I think I'd clocked up about 80 quid in petrol bills. And I was being paid 10 quid a week. And I said, is there anything I can do with these? And he said, yes, you can pay them. And I said, well, can't I claim them back? He said, no, that's not the deal. We pay you £10 a week. And I just thought it was just a ridiculous thing to be doing. And I went to this day release thing. It actually was at Leeds Poly in those days. And I found it totally uninspiring. And having left Leeds University, I then was back at the same place, leaving a part-time course that I'd signed up for, and I remember going to see my uncle, and who I was very close to, my father's youngest brother, Paul, and he said, "Oh, well, forget that." He said, "Come and have some fun with me." So literally, the following Monday, I think I started working at Stylo Matchmakers, which was the sports division of Stylo Barrett Shoes in those days, and at the time, so this is the early 1980s. Leeds United were a great team, Celtic were a great team, Liverpool were a great team, and those three teams, I think had just won the 4 titles in the UK. They'd won the league. Leeds won the league, Liverpool the cup, Celtic I think the Scottish double again or whatever. And they used to run this thing, the Choice of Champions. And I remember going once to meet Steve Highway and Kevin Keegan with my uncle. And just amazing, I was like a kid in a sweet shop. And similarly, they were very involved in golf merchandise, and I remember working at the British Open on the stylo stand, and similarly, seeing some of these golfing greats of that time. And it just was tremendous fun. So much so, I think my father thought, or was worried, that I might become sort of some playboy and might enjoy myself too much and work too little. And he came home one day and he said, well, that's enough of that. You're going to go and work in a proper shop. And I got sentenced to a year. Well, I don't think it turned out, it was probably 6 months working in Pennywise Worksop branch, which,
Right.
I mean, I know retail's miserable today, but Worksop was a bloody miserable place. And if any of your listeners are from Worksop, I apologise. But me coming from North Leeds, this prince who had been, brought up with just about everything that he ever expected or needed, suddenly to be thrust into this environment, I found that very difficult too. And I did that for about 6 months. The Pennywise business was growing very quickly. And I mean, I often think back and I wish as a family maybe that we'd kept the discount business and sold the footwear business, because at its time it was a forerunner. At the time, two great guys from North Leeds, Stephen Fernley and Paul Appel, were just starting the pound stretcher business with Phil Harris. And that went on to be a mammoth business. And we've had other ones that have since started, like Home Bargains, B&M. None of them were about in those days. And yet we were in that business, and I think could have been hugely successful at it. As it happened, Phil Harris came along and bought Pennywise and put it together with his pound stretcher business. And at that time, that was when I decided that I fancied the idea of being in the property business, and my dad suggested I came and worked for one or two of his senior colleagues here at Town Centre, and I've never left. So I think I've been here 38 years, and it's gone in a flash. When I think back over the 38 years, I was very blessed. Dad had two fantastic lieutenants in the business. He had a guy called David Whitehead, who was a grumpy Yorkshireman, but just the most fantastic mentor that I didn't realise at the time, but he became one of my greatest friends in business. I'm still in touch with him today still. Not that, a bit frail now, but David was just an amazing teacher, and he taught me a lot of what I know about property. He had a colleague called Peter Warrington, who was the finance director here at Town Centre. Peter sadly passed away, actually in the summer, on the same day, coincidentally, as my Uncle Paul, who I used to work with at Styler Matchmakers. They both passed away on the same day in June. And Peter, again, was just a fantastic guy and incredibly patient with me. And the two of them together sort of groomed me for, if that's not an inappropriate word to use, for running this business. And in the early years, when I think back, it was well, it's still a lot of fun, not in the same way as it was then. I think, young and naive, you look at things very differently, and you get shaped by success and failure. So someone asked me my successes. I don't really remember a lot of those. I remember the worst deal I ever did, which was to buy a piece of property on a road called Iverson Road in West Hampstead in London. And we paid £1 million for this piece of land that we were going to do a residential development on. And I think it's virtually impossible to do this with property, but we paid £1 million for it, and I lost £1 million on the deal. And it was a great. Wow. It was very painful, but it was a great experience, because I think you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And some of the things I did were foolish. Some of the things I did were too hurried, and I accepted other people's opinions too quickly and too readily, and trusted anybody. And those are all things that young people, they've got to experience the mistake for themselves. It's my oldest son is in the business with me. He runs our car park business, and if I tell him, Benji, don't do this, don't do that, it's almost an invitation that that's what he wants to do. And I try very different things. That my father was quite strict with me. Gave me the opportunity, but he didn't give me any special treatment, or I didn't feel he gave me any special treatment. And I try and stand away from Benj and let him do what he does in his own space. But you learn from those. You learn from those mistakes, and you learn to how to trust people better when you've had bad experiences. You learn how to do all sorts of things from bad experiences. So that's a bit of a long answer to a quick question.
No, I mean, but I can relate so much to the whole thing of you've got to go through these mistakes to really understand how the world works, and you're right. You can't just tell someone what to do. With the deal that went wrong, what was the key thing that why did you lose the million? What was the key reason for it?
So it's overlooked the rail. I don't know if you know West Hampstead, but the main, I've forgotten the name. Is it North End Road in West Hampstead? But the main high street. Is dominated with a bridge that goes over the railway line and the railway station. And it was just beyond the railway station was the land, and that's where we were going to build this residential. And in those days, whatever you built next to a railway line, you needed to agree with Railtrack what you were going to. Well, you still need to agree with Railtrack what you're going to do. And I was promised that we would get planning consent for, I don't know, 100 units in a tower block or whatever it was, and I think we ended up getting consent for about 20.
Oh wow, a bit of a difference.
And you're not allowed to have so many windows overlooking a railway. All the regulations, and now of course I know all that. You know, I'd never make the same mistake, but I was the glomp that they found that paid too much money for it, and so yeah, those are things you learn very quickly. I'd have preferred not to have learnt it. It was expensive, you know. I think that was probably the most expensive. That was the worst deal I think I've ever done. And I've done some stummers in my life, but that was the standout where you lose 100% of your investment. So can we move on? It's a bit painful.
You can't beat that one, can you? It was Ben Lyons that was asking the question earlier about the football. The name didn't appear, and we've also got Anthony Padmore saying hello, and someone else on Facebook that's saying hello, Johnny and Edward. Edward, when you first joined Town Centre Securities, those sort of 38 years ago, now Town Centre Securities, the assets are worth, I think, 325 million. What do you think the assets were worth when you first joined 38 years ago? If you had to sort of
probably about 725 million, maybe.
Oh right, okay.
you know the old story. How do you get a small fortune? Well, you start with a big one, maybe. I guess we were worth probably about 50-60 million quid in those days.
Wow,
something of that order.
So in those days, that was a huge amount then.
Oh, it was a big business. It was a big business. It was a growing business. I mean, I think back to some of the best deals I did. I bought the old Elida Gibbs factory on Whitehall Road, and turned it into a car park. And we've obviously been developing. We developed a Premier Inn and number one Whitehall on the site, and then sold a bit at the other end. I think that was probably one of the best deals I did. I bought a garage on Great Ancoats Street in Manchester, known as Hill's Garage, from the administrator, and I bought a collection of second-hand. I say collection. It was no collection of second-hand cars with this thing, and set about selling the cars. And the site that we've assembled in Manchester is incredibly valuable. So we've got 17 acres, literally just adjoining Piccadilly Station. We've just finished a 90-unit residential development in partnership with the Leeds firm. The building's called Burlington House. We've done a retail development where we've got Go Outdoors, Marks and Spencer's, Aldi, and Pure Gym on the site. I mean, that's been a hugely lucrative development for us. We've sold bits and built bits. We built an office building on the site, which is the UK headquarters for an international architectural practice called the Building Design Partnership. It's just been a really interesting scheme, and actually the opportunities that has brought, not only financial but social as well. I count amongst some of my best friends Howard Bernstein, the leader of Manchester Council, who I remember going to see him when we were struggling to get planning consent, and Howard was just the most dynamic, amazing local authority leader that you'd probably ever come across, and he's now a personal friend, and got I've had the opportunity from who I work with to have some amazing connections, and that's a blessed existence, because Howard Bernstein doesn't return everybody's phone calls. I know he's very good at what he does. But that sort of thing is part of the joy of what I've been able to do over my working life, is to be able to mix with people who are certainly far more talented than me, but are just incredibly imaginative and dynamic people that you can't help but learn from and experience with some, and those opportunities that come with those are amazing.
Well, they say you need to mix with not just positive people, but also people that, entrepreneurial people that sort of are not above, that's not the right word, but, that have experienced more things and learnt more lessons. And that's one of the best ways to grow a business, to surround yourself with these people and to learn from these people. Well, talking of mixing with people, we were talking earlier, you've mixed with a fair few royals, haven't you? Not only. Go on.
No, again, that comes from the sort of charitable stuff, which was very much imbued in me by my parents, by my mother and father, who both had huge sort of philanthropic ambitions and attitudes. So obviously, the thing that was nearest and dearest to my heart was the Leeds Jewish Welfare Board, where I was president for 9 years. Again, I think I was very fortunate. That a lot of people tell me you need to find someone better to take over from you and start looking early, just in case of the thing. And I was privileged to work with some amazing people, both paid colleagues and trustees. Sheila Saunders taught me an awful lot about communal work, and she was an amazing person. But some of my fellow trustees were amazing, and I can think of a few, but I ended up ultimately handing over to my friend Russell Manning, who has taken the Welfare Board onto a whole new level, and with some of the same trustees, with some new ones, and that was a great learning point. When I finished at the Welfare Board about 5 years ago, it coincided with my youngest son, Jacob, going 5 years out of treatment from leukemia, and I thought it was appropriate to say thank you, and not just in a way of writing out a check, because it's very hard to do with the NHS, that sort of stuff anyway. So I decided to apply for and became chairman of what was then known as the Leeds Teaching Hospital Charitable Foundation, and that has been an amazing experience. That has been amazing. Dee and I fell in love with the NHS when they saved Jacob's life. So to us, it's not a new thing. It was actually, dare I say, 500 weeks ago last Friday that Jacob was diagnosed. It was May the 20th, 2011. So it's just coming up for 10 years next May. And the people that looked after him.
It's beautiful that you count. It's beautiful that you count the weeks as well.
Some people tell me I shouldn't do that, but
no, I like it. And having had a child with a heart condition and needed the NHS, I completely get it. I think it's a nice thing. Sorry, you were saying.
But the people, what I saw, I would have been before that the person at Roundy Hall. If I needed something done, I would have been in a private room with Sky Television and smoked salmon sandwiches. What this taught us was that what you need around you are the people that can care and that are available. And it was easy for me to say it. When he wanted people to stay, it was his mum who stayed with him. I didn't spend one night with him in hospital. Dee was in and out, all the time. But I went with him to all the appointments. I went with every time he got chemo. I went with. And what I saw were people who, cared. These were people who didn't mind, cleaning up and literally cleaning up mess. And they always did it with a smile on their face. It was just a huge learning experience. And I think it changed me. I think it changed Dee. I think it changed Jacob. But the important thing I thought was to say thank you. And in answer to your question about royalty, through that certainly has thrust me into a place of meeting royalty regularly.
And before you go into the royalty though, so he's now 23. He's fully recovered from leukemia.
Yeah.
The for Leeds Care, just tell me a bit more about what you're involved in there. That's and what you're sort of the problems that you've got, what you're trying to achieve with Leeds Care.
The Leeds Teaching Hospitals Charitable Foundation, the original thing, was a big charity. It had £50 million of assets, and it was a grant-giving organisation. But I went to my first trustee meeting, and there wasn't even the F word on the agenda. Fundraising just never, ever appeared there. And I was gobsmacked. And I remember going to a meeting early on where they were asked to replace the robotic, the robot to do laparoscopic surgery for kids. And the guy in charge with his half-moon glasses basically dismissed this consultant out the door and sent him away with his tail between his legs. And I was gobsmacked. And he needed £1 million to replace this piece of kit. And this is keyhole surgery. This is right at the cutting edge of getting better outcomes, getting quicker recoveries. That saves the NHS a fortune. People are in hospital less time. And this guy just dismissed him. And I thought, if I'm going to change one thing here, we're going to be a fundraising charity, and that's what we're becoming. Our legacy portfolio of investments, we've helped the NHS. We've given quite a lot of that money away now, and in order to get Leeds well positioned, in order to get the grant that they were given to go ahead with the new children's hospital. So our latest fundraising challenge is that we are tasked with raising £35 million towards the fit out of the new children's hospital. This is the Leeds Way, you might have heard of. Is the problem is sort of the headline name for it, and ultimately the whole of the LGI site is going to be rebuilt, and they are literally just started on site with the first diggers demolishing the nurses' home, and I mean, it's just amazing, and from top to bottom, inside to out. The Leeds NHS has been an amazing turnaround under the leadership of Julian Hartley and Linda Pollard. It's become a sort of exemplar of the NHS. It's now running at break even or near. Well, it was prior to COVID. I'm not sure the impact of COVID would have been quite dramatic, but we are blessed with having the Countess of Wessex as our patron, and she is just amazing. She is just amazing, and I've got to know her quite well over the last 4 or 5 years, and there isn't anything that's too much trouble. The first time I went to meet her in her office at Buckingham Palace was quite an interesting experience, because I wasn't sure what to say and a bit tongue-tied or whatever. And I was told by the person that went with me, you need to be really careful about talking about fundraising. And she put me straight away at my ease. She said, I'll tell you if you go too far, and I'll even tell you if you're not going far enough, sort of thing. And she has offered us the use of her home in Bagshot. She's offered us that we can use any of the London palaces as for to hold events. So with that sort of help and patronage, if it's a handicap race, you should be at the front to start with. And all royalty are amazing at that. I was quite involved with the Princess Regeneration Trust. I met Prince Charles quite a few times, who is also amazing. I mean, his drive and passion around regenerating buildings is phenomenal, and his knowledge is unbelievable. He owns a pottery business, and I remember talking to him about it because it wasn't making any money, and he was asking advice how to deal with it. And he asked me to explain the concept of a pre-pack with him. And I mean, the idea that a member of the royal family, the heir to our throne, is confronted with doing an insolvency pre-pack sort of arrangement. I said to him, I said, you're going to have to excuse me, I've got to hold my head here because this is just too. He said, why do you think it's any different for me than it is for you? So I said, well, because you shouldn't have to deal with the likes of a Hilco turnaround specialist or whoever it was that they were being recommended. And when I say, I've been blessed, these are just things that you sort of got to pinch yourself to think, well, I'm there talking to Prince Charles about a bloody pre-pack,
That's crazy.
And but what did he do? He bought a pottery business in Stoke. There was a massive housing shortage in that particular vicinity. He took a factory, shrunk it down into about an eighth of the buildings, turned the rest into very modern, interesting design housing, and then but it was all sold off and everything. But then he was left with the pottery business, and just amazing. And I remember that was at the time when Jacob was poorly that was going on, and when I had conversations with him, the first thing he'd ask me, how's your son doing? And you'd think, who's told him? How does he know? Or does he just remember? And I don't know whether he remembers or he just had someone very clever who was briefing him. But you could tell they have empathy, they have understanding. Some of them aren't so clever, but I've got to say I'm hugely impressed with those members. I've met Prince Charles most, the Countess of Wessex a lot, Princess Anne 2 or 3 times, and all 3 of them are the real deal.
You were invited to Prince Charles Dumfries' house in Ayrshire.
Yeah, so that was there were 4 couples who were invited, and we stayed overnight in his hunting lodge, and it was just an amazing experience. Had dinner with him and the Duchess of Cornwall. Quite difficult to understand what she says. If you put 3 grapes in your mouth and try talking with them, maybe. But just an amazing evening. There were a couple of people from the press there, and again, just a fantastic experience. And those are things that money can't buy, really.
And you've also met the Queen 2 or 3 times, and this wasn't even through receiving the Queen's birthday honour, the OBE that you got for the services to the economy and community. You met her separately to that. So tell me about the meetings with the Queen.
So one was at the 350th anniversary of the Jewish community in the UK. So that was when Oliver Cromwell let the Jews back in the 1650s or whatever. She and the Duke of Edinburgh together, which was a very nice event. And I met her. The most recent was at the
Leeds Arena.
At the Leeds Arena at the topping out ceremony. And I remember she asked me, "What can you tell me about this part of Leeds?" And it sort of put me on the spot. Well, one thing I did reckon is don't and ah, just say what you say, and they'll never bother when checking whether you're correct or not. So. But she's you look at her and you think, she's only a little lady and got this porcelain coloured skin and just you look and you sort of think, wow.
So you were presented by Princess Anne for your OBE. Talk to me about receiving your OBE.
Well, the 2 things that the standout memories. I was told you only get 2. You get a spouse and 2 spare tickets. So I was told if you ring, you might get an extra one. So I rang the Cabinet Office and I said, how much do you get for these 3 tickets on eBay? And the lady said to me, oh, don't do that. You can't do that. I said, well, I've got a problem because my wife obviously wants to come and I've got 4 kids and I've only got 2 tickets. So I don't know which 2 to fall out with. Can you help me? She said, oh, well, if you don't tell anybody, we'll give you 4 tickets.
Oh, wow.
And so I was told, get there early. And the 2 standout memories was, so we got there early and then your family get to sit right at the front.
Wow.
I got taken off to a separate room where I was in the same list as David Williams.
Oh, wow.
David Williams, as he was on the list. And anyhow, the kids went off and they told me this story later that because they were first in, Jacob wanted to sit by the aisle. So there's 2 blocks of seats that go back, and he wanted to sit on the seat nearest the aisle. And the Royal Equerry or whatever who was seating everyone down wanted to seat them in the first 5 seats as they walked in, not further along the row. So he went to sit further along the row, and the equerry said, "Excuse me, young man, you're sitting here." And Jacob said to him, "No, I want to sit here." And he turned to Jacob, and he's apparently, I wasn't there, he said, "Today is a do as you're told day, not a do as you want day." and so we obviously never let Jacob forget that. But the best thing was, so you look around and you see if you recognise anybody, and I obviously recognised David Walliams. And they assemble you by order that you're given. So the knights and they go first, and then the CBEs goes next. And I didn't know what what honour he was getting. And the next one, we're getting OBEs, and then David Walliams' name's called out. So he goes, I'm thinking, W, how many X and Y's are there going to be, right? And there weren't any. So I was literally next to David Walliams in the queue to get my OBE. And I had this 15-minute conversation with him, which was just amazing, right? And he chatting to me chatting to him. And then you stand in line, and then you go to get your honour. Literally, you go and you bow and whatever. And as he was about to go, he turned round and he said to me, "Just remember, Edward, the only honour worth having are the ones that come before your name," right? Which I thought was quite a funny thing. And I start laughing, then it's my turn to go. and that was it. And then I was invited to Variety Club, had their 50th anniversary party at Buckingham Palace last summer before COVID. And David Walliams was their guest of honour. And there was a cocktail party in Buckingham Palace, and then you get to look around, and then off we go. And as we're leaving, Dee and I, as we're leaving, I see David Walliams standing there with his mum. And I went over to David Walliams and I said, "The last time I came to Buckingham Palace," he said, "you followed me to get my OBE." And I said to him, "That's amazing that you remembered that, David." I said, "You must meet hundreds of people." He said, "I do, but I've only had one OBE."
Well, true.
and amazing, just a little tale.
It's absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love it. And sticking on this sort of royal theme for a moment, you're deputy lieutenant for the county of West Yorkshire.
Yeah.
How did that come about? And what I didn't realise, we were just chatting earlier, I didn't realise the term. I mean, you're in it for what, 12 years?
I guess if you're younger when you're appointed, you can be longer. So I don't know. Still, I've heard now that the term is only, I think, for 5 years, but that's quite a recent thing. So now it might have changed, but before that, you have to be available to do what's asked of you until you're 70, and then you go on to a B list if you're ever asked. So there are a few things that you're expected to do, regardless. So Remembrance Sunday is something that's a big thing for the lieutenancy. So any parish church, any synagogue, anybody who wants to do a poppy presentation of some description will almost definitely get a member of the lieutenancy coming to attend, and ideally in the uniform, but if not, then without. So that's something. Last November, 14 months ago, I was asked if I'd like to lay the wreath on the pitch at Ellen Road on the Saturday of the day of the game that is nearest to. Every club does one of these, depending on it's the day before Remembrance Sunday or a week before Remembrance Sunday. So that was a huge thrill, actually, doing Ellen Road last year. And I've been to a couple of, I actually haven't officiated yet at a British Citizenship Award ceremony, but I think I'm told that, well, the ones I've attended, they're very special for the recipients who are being given their British citizenship, and those are amazing. What else have I been asked to do? I've been on a couple of school visits where you just asked you go in your uniform and you're asked to explain. The royal visits, by and large, are taken by either the Lord Lieutenant, who now is Ed Anderson, or his deputy Lord Lieutenant. So it's unlikely that a deputy lieutenant would ever be asked to do a royal visit. Great if you were, but in any event, I have to say I've been quite lucky in that regard anyway. So,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think these are things you should be greedy with. How did it come about? I was very friendly with Ingrid Roscoe, who sadly passed away just a few months ago. She had a stroke and passed away. Ingrid was Ed Anderson's predecessor, and I was appointed just as she retired, and I think that's how it came about. And listen, it's a lovely thing. It's a nice thing to be acknowledged, but you know, I think one of those things maybe not to be taken too seriously, if dare I say.
Right.
It's an important office, but
Yep.
you know, it is what it is.
But it's nice to have some fun with it too.
Yeah, and all these things that I do, I have to say that in almost without exception, the people that you come across are lovely people and nice people who have good ethics, good standards, and they're a pleasure to meet and be with, whether it's the hospital,
Yeah.
the lieutenancy, all of the things that I do. And again, that's been a huge blessing for me.
I mean, you were saying you were only on a Zoom call with the Countess of Wessex only a week or two ago with Leeds Cares. What does happen on a Zoom call with you and Sophie?
Well, it's quite interesting. I'm sitting in my office in Leeds, and you can see behind me there. It's a great view of it's all reflected because it's dark outside. And she said, "So I've got a yucca plant here." And she said, "Are you sitting in Hawaii?" And I said, "No, I'm not sitting in Hawaii." She said, "Well, the sunset's amazing, and you've got some tropical plants there." So I took the iPad over and I showed her the view of the town hall. I said, "This is Leeds City Centre at sunset." She said, "It's amazing." She said, "Better than the view out of my office." And she turned the thing round to show me she was sitting in her office at Bagshot Hall. I mean, we were planning our fundraising. We were planning our fundraising activities for the coming year, which she's incredibly supportive of. We're planning to have a clay pigeon shoot in the grounds of Bagshot Hall. She's offered us to have a dinner at Buckingham Palace, and if Buckingham Palace isn't available, one of the other London palaces. She's offered to come to Leeds a couple of times in the next 12 months. She said she likes to come once a year to all the charities where she's a patron. But because she hasn't done one this year, she said she'll try and do 2 next year for us. You're not supposed to ask for people for money in front of royalty, which is, but you know, I think it's understood, and she certainly recognises that's the reason and the raison d'être around this stuff. I mean, just for someone who, I mean, she has a marketing background, I think, and
does she?
Is hugely switched on to how people are, and that makes life a lot easier than if they were a bit stuffy and stodgy. But she's just incredibly helpful. So.
I wanted to get on to Town Centre Securities, and I mean, you know, we're obviously going through a huge pandemic, and so things will be affected right now. But just to get an idea, I think 10 years ago, 85% of your portfolio was retail. That's dropped to 35% or 35% now. But you were telling me that even just in the last 15 months, it dropped by 10% from 45 to 35. Yeah. What are you seeing? What's, you know, obviously we're seeing shops being closed, businesses going bust. What are you seeing as a landlord, having probably more internal conversations with these guys? What's going on?
We're seeing a mixture of good, bad, and ugly. Ugly. I think you were on a call that I did earlier on in the pandemic. We had to cope with JD Sports putting one of their subsidiaries through a pre-pack. I was talking about Prince Charles doing it. So JD Sports, a company capitalised at £3.5 billion or something mental, in order to save 30 million quid of commitments. They put their go outdoors business through a pre-pack, and basically the landlords are the ones that end up footing the bill. So I find that a huge injustice, and I think that the insolvency laws need to be changed and need to be changed very quickly. Go Outdoors is back in business. We are trying to negotiate a new deal with them. And if we do, we do. And if we don't, we do have a plan B for that particular property. But as an example, JD Sports only announced last week they went and bought a multiple shoe business in California for, I think, nearly $350, $400 million. And I think that, if a company has an event of insolvency around it, I think there should be some respectable period of time before they're allowed to go and start expanding again. Because it feels a bit like, the landlords are paying. It's heads they win, tails we lose. We had Boots the Chemist, who hadn't paid us any rent since Boxing Day last year. We took them to court, and we've agreed terms for them to pay. It's subject to a confidentiality clause. So I'm not going to tell you the terms of what we've agreed, but there is a moratorium in place. I don't know if you're aware of this, or your other listeners are aware of this, that landlords have had the choice of having to go for possession and using eviction for possession in order to collect debt. I have to say that in the 38 years I've been at Town Centre, I can count on the fingers of one hand, and I don't need my thumb, the amount of times that we've used that as a tactic to get our debts paid. It's just so historic and Victorian in its approach that it's the last thing that you'd want to do. But what it means is those bigger companies know that if they don't pay their rent, there's only a limited way we can get recourse. And that's wrong. At the other end of the equation, as I walk out my office door down here in Merrion Centre, opposite, we've got a shoe repairer. He applied for the local authority grant, which he got, and I came into the office one day and he said, "Oh, Edward, can I have a word with you?" He's a mad keen Arsenal fan. Not that I hold that against.
Much.
And I chatted to him about it, and he was almost in tears that, the business is closed, the students aren't. In Merrion, we're very reliant on office workers and students for our sort of retail demographic. And he said, "I just can't afford to pay rent anymore." I said, "Well, don't." I said, "Don't pay any rent." This was September. I said, "Don't pay this quarter's rent." I said, and we'll talk to you at the end of December to see how you're doing and see what. And I said, "We'll share the pain with you. You've paid every penny. You've been closed April, May, June or whatever. And yet you've paid 100% of your rent, not taken one penny through your till. We understand." And here's a guy who's desperate to get his business back going. He's paid his rent in full and he's stuck. And you wonder, who would you rather help? Would you rather help Boots the Chemist or someone like that? And
yeah,
we've had all sorts of requests for help. The bottom line is we've collected about 80% of the rents that we're entitled to collect as cash, and we've deferred about another 6 or 7% and added it on either later or to be paid by a lease extension or whatever. So we've worked with tenants where we can, but it's very tricky, and retail is not good. Fortunately, we don't own much property in and around London. We do own some, and the idea, I think as a rough rule of thumb, it's sort of 80%, 20%, that old rule. They do 80% of their trade in the 20% of the time in and around Christmas. And for retail to be closed down the week before Christmas is just unbearable. And unfortunately, it's not been a nationwide ban. It's just a southeast ban. But the southeast is a quarter of the UK. It's what is it? 18 million people live in under Tier 4 regulations.
Yes, a third of the country, isn't it? And I agree. I agree. The impact must be huge for them to have made, for the government to have made the decision to do it. You can only assume that there's good reason, because the impact is so huge on the retail economy.
Well, I know, and so I get to know the Leeds NHS Trust numbers. They have been sending us weekly bulletins. So I know last week the infection rate, I think, was 136 per 100,000 in Leeds, and it's crept up to 141 this week in Leeds. So it is on the rise, whereas per the previous 6 weeks, it had just fallen each week. This new strain is clearly coming to Leeds. It's in Sheffield. It will be in Leeds already. And I guess we're looking at some sort of lockdown. I had hoped that Tier 3, which is what Leeds is in, I mean, it's terrible for food and beverage, but Tier 3 at least allows non-essential retail to open, and it allows people. And I think town has been quite busy the last 2 or 3 days, but it is incredibly difficult to retail to be closed and hampered at a time like this, and there is no choice. I think the government have done a poor job of communicating it. I think that there were far better ways, but they're probably damned if they do and damned if they don't. And, this time last week, I was expecting Leeds to be in Tier 2.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were. What's the footfall been like in the Merrion Centre then?
We're down about 2/3, so we're running at about 35% of normal.
Wow.
But the retailers, I mean, M&S, we've got M&S in Manchester. They've been telling us that they're trading pretty well on food and discount. They're trading pretty well. On anything else, I'm not sure. Morrison's that we've got in Merrion Centre said that they've had, a very acceptable last 2 or 3 weeks as compared to last year. And we've heard a similar sort of reports from Home Bargains in Iceland. So the essential retail, and that's why Merrion is quite sort of resistant to these sort of things, because we've got quite a densely populated residential population nearby. So Merrion is visited regularly, and essential retail has done well in this time. Well, I say it's done well. It's done acceptably, but it's tough. Our car park business has had a really horrid time.
I was about to ask you. I'm aware of time, but a couple of questions that I wanted to get to. The car parks. You must have been hit massively on the car parks.
Massively, but it recovers very. The car park business recovers very quickly.
Right.
We were back to 60-70% within 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown ending. Back in June, and particularly the London car parks were trading their socks off because people aren't using public transport. So the London car parks have done well. All the car parks have been trading okay, actually.
But I'm guessing you've not been able to get grant. I'm guessing you've not been able to get grants to cover loss in earnings here.
We have had no assistance whatsoever. We've had no assistance, and the retail has had a rating holiday. And the car park business has been given no rating holiday whatsoever. So the only benefit we can get is if we close the car park, we can claim empty rates for 3 months, which we have been. But as soon as you reopen, you start paying rates again. Whereas retail has been given a 12-month holiday.
And on the commercial side of the business, with B2B businesses, what is there any impact there of people, with regard to remote working, more people working from home? Are you starting to see and feel that?
No. Well, I always starting to see. I can see that offices are empty as I look out at Merrion House. It's sparsely occupied. We've just finished the refurbishment of a building 123 Albion Street, which is diagonally opposite Merrion. It's known as the Cube. What's known as the Cube. Where we were refurbishing the offices, and we're hoping to have relet the empty space that we've created. We've got some good tenant interest in all the empty space, so we're hoping to have relet that certainly by Easter. And in Manchester, similarly, we had a couple of schemes that were underway when COVID hit, and the demand has been quite good. It's slow, it's difficult, but I do think that people are wanting to get back to work, they're wanting to get back to their offices, they're wanting to get back to normal. And there's a lot of business that you can do on Zoom, there's a lot of business that you can't.
Yeah.
And face-to-face is just so much better.
Yeah, of course. I think we're going to have to come to an end because I can see the time. I could chat to you for another hour. It's been fantastic. And what's been good is I set out to get to know Edward Ziff better, and you've certainly given me a great backstory, which is brilliant. It's such it's fascinating to hear.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for listening.
The successes are just brilliant, and I think we only covered about 10% of them, really.
We covered them all, and I built them up a bit.
If you have been watching or listening, thank you for listening. And please join us again for the next one. Edward Ziff, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you and all your listeners.
And to you.
A healthy, peaceful, and maybe prosperous one if we're half lucky.
And hopefully, yes, a far better one. Take care, everyone, and we will see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed.
You've been listening to the Johnny Ross Audio Experience. Thanks so much for joining me. If you want to continue the conversation, head over to my website, fleek.marketing, or find me on LinkedIn. That's all for today. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, tag me in your social media posts, and please leave me a review on iTunes. It will make a huge difference for me. I will see you soon.